this is Penn Jillette, Penn and Teller. Big guy does magic, smaller guy next. Love you all. Peace.
Hello, welcome to In Time. Thank you for joining us. We have breaking news. The U.S. has removed the restrictions on long-distance strikes into Russia by Ukraine. Reuters is reporting, quote, Biden allows Ukraine to use U.S. arms to strike inside Russia. Now, this is being considered, a Trump spokesman has said that this is essentially escalating the war right before he leaves office. Alex Plitasis, a senior non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council, says removing targeting restrictions will allow Ukrainians to stop fighting with one hand tied behind their back. However, like everything else, I believe history will say the decision came way too late. Just like the ATACMS, HIMARS, Bradley fighting vehicles, Abrams tanks, and the F-16, they were all needed much sooner. Zelensky has been requesting permission to attack inside Russia for quite some time using U.S. weapons. We have said no on the grounds that Putin has made it clear that he would consider this a attack by the U.S. and a considerable escalation. Let's see, who is Poland's foreign minister, Radzław Sikorski, has said that, now this is Poland's foreign minister, so, you know, he's not speaking for the U.S., but he said, quote, President Biden is responding to the entry of North Korean troops into the war and the massive Russian missile strike in the only language that Vladimir Putin understands, by removing the restrictions on Ukraine's use of Western missiles. Commander, thank you for joining us, and let's see. We have Commander and 𝐒𝐨𝐿𝐜𝐴𝐵. Thank you both. Commander, what can you tell us about this?
Well, the chief systems that this is going to affect are the HIMARS. It's the ATACMS and long-range precision munitions that go with the HIMARS launchers, which we have given them, but we've told them they could only use against targets inside their borders or specific limited area near Kharkov, and that they could use them inside Russia. Removing this basically opens up the engagement envelope to 190 to 300 miles inside the Russian border. And that puts all sorts of important logistical targets in engagement radius. So the Ukrainians could start hitting ammo bunkers, fuel depots, rail switching yards, all of that kind of stuff. And as we know, logistics is probably Russia's main vulnerability. It's their one big weak point. And the more you can continue to hammer that and damage it, the less capable their forces are going to be in trying to conduct offensive operations.
It appears as if Ukraine has been expecting this, and what we're being told is that they already have a significant offensive plan that will be coming shortly. Now, shortly, the way I read it, I didn't anticipate that meaning within hours, but certainly within days. How long would it take if they attack significant portions of the Russian logistical infrastructure for the military? How long? Right now, they've been very successful. The Russians have been more successful than at any time since 2022. in their offensive. They are hitting with the greatest number of missiles that they've hit since the war has started, and they are making ground in Ukraine. How long before this may impede that progress or halt it altogether?
Assuming they already have target lists made out, they know what they're going to engage, I think they can commence an attack anywhere within 24 to 48 hours from receiving the official release. If they're not quite as prepared, it may be, a week before anything happens. But I think it's probably in their best interest to make things happen as quickly as possible, because now that the Russians have been officially told this is going to happen, they can start trying to move some of those very lucrative targets out of the engagement range.
Well, and Trump could also overturn this once he comes into power and immediately say, nope, you can't do that anymore. And I'm curious to know
Empty the magazine before the 20th of January.
Exactly. Although if Trump says that he's not going to support Ukraine anyway, which we don't know what he's going to say, but if he says that, he doesn't have a lot of bargaining power to tell them that they can't strike Russia with the weapons they've got, because it's not like he's threatening. His only bargaining chip is to remove the supply of weapons from the U.S. So if he says he's going to do that anyway, then he's going to have to choose one way or another. Either keep supplying Ukraine, or they're going to keep striking inside Russia, I would assume.
Yeah. The other thing I think is important is, to some extent, this may either remove the pressure from or put the pressure on EU countries who have provided similar long-range weapons to Ukraine, but have also kept restrictions on their use in place. So it may convince them to, well, if the U.S. is giving them the go-ahead, maybe we should too.
Right now, the closest territory that Ukraine has, or the closest positions that Ukraine has to Moscow, is in the Kursk region, if I understand correctly, which is the occupied Kursk region, which is about 330 miles from Moscow. Do they have anything in that area that can hit Moscow other than the drones that they've been using?
I don't know what air-launched weaponry we've given them. There are air-launched cruise missile kind of things that can reach that far without having to necessarily expose the launching Ukrainian aircraft to Russian air defenses by going across the front lines. So if those restrictions are lifted and they want to use those against targets in Moscow, they can. The real question is, what targets are there in Moscow that are worth striking? Ukrainians need to be careful not to be seen in the same light as the Russians are being seen with their indiscriminate attacks. They need to make sure that their attacks are carefully tailored on viable, legitimate military targets. And the nice thing that these missiles potentially give them that the drones don't is that they're arguably more accurate. So in theory, you could say, okay, we're going to hit that ammo depot that we've previously put on the do not strike list because it's across the street from a school. Well, if you have a very accurate missile and you can send it to a specific location which will not cause secondary detonations and damage the school, then you can do that. And that's what these missiles potentially give the Ukrainians the ability to do.
All right, Zandring, any thoughts?
He's muted.
Shouldn't be by me. Hold on a sec. Zandring, are you there? All right, I'm not picking up any audio from him, so it may be he's in a dead zone, or there's. I'm not picking up any audio. Will this? There's been increasing talk of there's going to have to be some kind of, whether it's a temporary ceasefire or negotiated settlement, some kind of way to settle this, at least temporarily. One thinking is that one reason that Zelensky has been holding on to the Kursk area is that it gives him more negotiating power to try to say, well, we'll give you back Kursk if you give us back Crimea and or the Donbas region. Does this removal of the restriction on long-range attacks, does this give the Ukrainians any more negotiating power?
Yeah, but it's more in the form of the worst condition they can put the Russian military in by striking at logistical infrastructure. The more likely it is for the Russians to come to the negotiating table with a certain degree of flexibility in their demands. Because heretofore, their demands have basically been unconditional surrender, and we'll call that a negotiated peace, which it isn't.
As you know, I like to ask you hypotheticals, and I know you're not always pleased with them, which is one reason I enjoy asking you. But this one is a truly unfair one, so please feel free to tell me you have absolutely no idea. Any guesses as to what Trump is going to do with this? I mean, I can't even begin to hazard a guess, so I don't know if you could.
It's really hard to say. I think it's worth noting that right after he won the election, Russian state media started putting up photos of Melania, nude photos of her, and making fun of him.
Oh.
So, you know, it isn't a really peachy, friendly relationship there. And if he's going to be doing some of the really hardline austerity measures that he's talking about doing when he takes office, which he knows is going to cause a lot of uproar in the country, as is typical with authoritarians, one of the first things you do to distract the population is get involved in a war. Now, I'm not saying it's a war against Russia, but it could be. It could be who knows what. But the idea is, if he's not on good terms with the Russians and he doesn't feel that the terms they're offering Ukraine match what he wants, he may say, well, in that case, we're going to not just continue aid to Ukraine, but maybe, you know, establish a no-fly zone over Ukraine or something like that. I'm not saying it'll happen, but it could. So all of that figures into what is likely to happen. I really can't say. That's one of the problems with trying to predict anything coming out of the incoming administration is it's all chaos. We have no ability to really guess what the heck it is they're going to do. They've made multiple contradictory statements. So your guess is as good as mine is which one applies at this hour of this day.
I really am. I think I'm a bit of a fan, as you know, of trying to make educated guesses. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong. But this is, I think, in the show's history, this administration coming in is the first time where I feel at a complete loss to be able to make any speculation as to what this guy is going to do.
Yeah.
I just can't, and it's not like there isn't a wealth of information that you could use but all that information just says is he's completely unreliable, completely unpredictable, and there is that's what the information, it's a weird position to be in.
And equally valid is, what effect is the infighting within the party going to cause?
There's, I think your Discord, your Discord notifications are coming through, and a few people have been hearing them in the live chat. Just FYI, Commander, I don't know if you can. But anyways, you were saying?
I was saying, I think there's also a chance, fairly good one, that all the petty feuding that's going on within the GOP right now about who gets to take what position and who gets to be closer to the emperor, regardless of whether he's wearing clothes or not, all of that. I think that has an impact on predicting the future, which really hasn't been considered. One of the things, as you know, that's been speculated is at some point they're going to want to invoke the 25th Amendment and make him go away because he's chaos. But at the same time, he still controls that base. And if he mobilizes that base, all of those people who are moving against him suddenly become target number one.
Well, and the only way to invoke the 25th, if I recall, unless I'm missing something, is to use the cabinet. And he's been reasonably careful about putting in cabinet members that are above all things loyal to him. Whether now they're also all chaotic, so those loyalties I think could change faster. But the people he's putting in have been some of the loudest, most vocal Trump supporters. But
remember, we're talking about a branch of the party that is motivated by quid pro quo exchanges. So if the backroom people that are providing all the money for this, the Heritage Foundation types, tell those cabinet appointees, hey, you make him go away and we'll do this for you, how deep does that loyalty go? I mean, for his part, Trump has already shown loyalty to him is about as far as he can blink. I mean, it's not even as far as he can spit. It's much closer.
That's a really good, and it goes both ways. I mean, in terms of, people who've been disloyal can suddenly be, oh, you've done something, now you're right back. All you have to do is kneel, kiss the ring, and you're right back in the good graces.
So many of the people that are, in the big positions have been very critical of him at one point or another. Now all of a sudden, oh, they're his best buddies. How long does that last? With somebody who's a malignant narcissist like he is, I would contend that all he has to do is remember, and I'm sure he harbors, has his little magic list of all the nasty things he thinks people have done to him. Break that list out one morning and, oh, he goes, boom, bye. And that's the thing about cabinet posts. They only serve at the pleasure of the president. So he can literally have a very nice breakfast with you this morning, and at lunch say, well, you're fired, bye. And you can't do a dang thing about it.
All right. I'd like to thank Johnny Ned Regard, 20, I think that's Swedish krona. I apologize if I got that wrong. Thank you very much for your super chat. Thank you, Biden, Slava Ukraini. And thank you all for joining us. Please do like, subscribe, and share the stream if you're interested in it. The support really, just a little support from enough people adds up very quickly. So thank you very much for that. I do want to try Azandring one more time. He is connected, but I'm not getting any audio from him. Azandring, are you there? Zandering? I'm going to try one other. Commander, can you hear him at all?
I cannot hear it.
Okay, so he's not. We're not getting it even in the room, in the green room. So, all right. So my final question is, what response do you think we may get from Putin? He has threatened to go chemical and or nuclear if the U.S. Makes this move. Those threats were quite some time ago. His more recent threats have been a little less bellicose, but he said we'd consider it a significant act of aggression by the U.S., a significant escalation. Poland has already come out, and I think a few other countries are now framing this as, no, Russia escalated by bringing North Korea into this, so this is just a evening of the balance. What do you think is going to happen on the Putin side, and what process is going through his mind now as to how to deal with it?
Well, how many times has Putin / Russia, since the start of this conflict, threatened to escalate to chemical and or nuclear weapons? So, why would this pronouncement of an empty threat be any different than the previous empty threats? It's not something you can discount entirely, but at the same time, we have intel ability to monitor what's going on, and we can tell if they're planning to do something like that.
All right. So, any other thoughts before we go? And actually, before I ask you that question, I will remind you we'll be continuing to monitor this in the Discord. Those of you who are here probably already know how this show works, but the Discord is our newsroom. It's the news hub. This came in, and it was actually 𝐍𝐤𝐜𝐴, who I think nailed his first. Bregwin, Dorito, we've got a lot of people who've given us breaking news and we've gone breaking with, but it was 𝐍𝐤𝐴 who brought us this one, so thank you very much for that. But, we're operated by the people who participate, so come on in, check it out, see what we do, and or just participate in the chat. So come on down to the Discord and see us there. Please do like and subscribe. It really does help us. We're very much a community-run organization. So thank you all for your support. Thank you again for that super chat. And Commander, any final thoughts before we go?
Well, one thing we do know is that Biden's making considerable effort to rush as much stuff to Ukraine before the 20th. I would think sending a whole bunch of ATACMS, the older variants we don't really use anymore, but would still give Ukrainians an enormous capability if we give them to them. I could see sending them a whole bunch of those.
It is nice. I mean, I think that this was the question we've all been asking, which is there's a limited amount of time now for those who actually support Ukraine to do something. And how much Biden does or doesn't support Ukraine has always kind of been on the table because it's been tepid. It's there, but it's tepid. And there's still, we've only given them, I think, about 10% of everything we promised them. So the question is, how much can he sort of push forward on the remaining? And I think we'll see. He's got a limited window on that. But all right, well, Commander, it was short notice. We really appreciate you joining us on such short notice. Thank you very much for that. I suspect Zandering can hear me, but we have been unable to hear him. But I would like to thank him for coming on such short notice. He has pointed out, I think he would. I will make an argument, because we did speak, he and I, on the phone right before this. I'll make an argument for what he would say if he were here, which is he would point out that people are going to freak out because Putin has said, well, I'm going to use nuclear weapons and all this other stuff, and this is an escalation, and isn't this how world wars start? And yes, it is how world wars start, but it's also something that happens all the time and has happened throughout human history. The wars have escalated, and there's only been 2 world wars. Pakistan released control of tactical nuclear weapons in the field, and nobody deployed them. There's always been, terrifying moments in history. This is not one of them. Putin is going to certainly have a lot of rhetoric. There's going to be a lot of fear mongering, but we're we need to remember. I know what's going to be on Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever. Oh, there he is, the 𝐍𝐜𝐜𝐿. So since he showed up, I did want to say this was his first successful drop on a breaking news, and we very much appreciate that. Thank you, 𝐍𝐜𝐜𝐿. You did a spectacular job with that. So I wanted to thank you. So, yeah, when you start to see World War III trending on Twitter, which you will, we ask you and ask everyone to just remember that while it is true that all world wars start this way, it's rare that escalations lead to a world war. It's not, they don't work. Does that sound like a fair way to describe it to you, Commander?
Yeah. This is, I've said this before, and it sounds strange, so I'll elaborate a little bit. I see us being in that pre-World War phase, similar to where Europe was in the mid-30s, where you have the Civil War going in Spain and everybody backing their different factions. And a lot of what they're doing with backing those factions is testing out their weapons to see how they stack up against the other guy's weapons, honing new tactics, etc. I'm not being cynical and saying that's what's going on deliberately in Ukraine, but that's certainly something you can see happening. You know, okay, we give them a couple of these systems, and we monitor how it's working. The Russians are the same way. Well, let's try using this system in this mode. Oh, okay, that seemed to work. Let's try using more of them. Oh, they found a counter. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah. That's been part of the deal. That has just, as you know, that's been part of the deal is we'll give you these weapons, but you have to tell us how well they worked, and we have people on the ground monitoring, and that is, not to be cynical, but that is absolutely part of the deal in us giving them these weapons is we want to know how they work out and improve them ourselves. Yes, sorry, please continue.
Right. So what I was going to say is that kind of a situation doesn't typically result in an escalation, but it's setting the stage for an expansion of the conflict to other theaters. So, for example, let's assume that Ukraine gets pressured into some sort of peace negotiations and the war ends in a armistice / ceasefire with details to be ironed out. What is the possibility that suddenly then the Russians decide, okay, we're quiet in this sector and we know Ukraine is, still licking its wounds from what happened over the past couple of years. Let's attack the Baltic countries now, or let's attack, Armenia or Georgia or whoever that we don't have particular happiness with. You see what I'm getting at? That's the kind of thing that spins it up to the next level. And I could see that happening because if the negotiated settlement occurs and Russia doesn't come out of it with a lot so that Putin can hang his mission accomplished banner on the Kremlin wall, then he's going to have to find some way to make something similar happen to show people that he's still the maximum leader, to nerf all those backroom palace plots that are going on. And he's the kind of person who just might do that, thinking that, now we can make it happen because we caught them with their pants down. They're not ready. They've given everything to Ukraine and they've left themselves vulnerable. What have you? You see what I'm getting at?
Yes. All right. Well, thank you again for your time, and I think that's something we're all going to keep an eye on. Once again, for those of you just joining us, the United States has authorized Ukraine to use its U.S.-supplied weapons in long-range attacks deep inside Russia. This is something Ukraine has been seeking basically since the start of the war, and we have said no. We have now lifted that restriction. There's a lot of comments coming out. It was just done earlier today. So the White House has not yet, to the best of my knowledge, commented on it unless they've done something in the last 10 minutes. But what we do know is the general consensus appears to be that this is being framed as, well, North Korean troops are fighting on behalf of Russia, so that's an escalation, and this is just matching, and that's how it's going to be framed. We don't have a response yet from Russia. We do know that, and we've heard from Ukraine, that they essentially were anticipating this happening at some point in the near future and are prepared to engage in those strikes. So we suspect there's going to be a significant escalation of strikes inside Russia reasonably soon. Come join us on the Discord to keep up with it. Thank you all for joining us today, and best of luck to everyone, and we will see you on our next scheduled show. Right now, I think that's just in time, a regular news update on Tuesday, and then downtime with Commander on Thursday. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you then. Have a good night.